read. I'm going to skip to the slides. All right, and so let me just go ahead with the thing about with the discussion of the work I'm doing on RFC 5661 BIS, and I realize there's some needed discussion, probably not now, about what to call that, as Chuck has pointed out. Anyway, let me give you the overview of this talk, which will probably fit under 15 minutes, but I've allocated 15 minutes. So I'm going to talk about, first of all, the goals, why we're doing why I'm doing, or we're doing what we're doing. And then there are a number of documents, some of which actually exist.
David,
we're talking about.
Can you hear me?
Nationalization Document, which is the only, so far, the only working group document in this effort. We're talking about
David,
security, which
me?
yes,
we can hear you.
Before the.
But I don't think David can hear us. I don't see any slides.
I'll give an overview of that, and the details will be in a later talk.
David, can you hear us?
I'll be talking about RFC 5661 base 02, which was also submitted just in time.
David,
and
can you hear me?
RFC 5661 bis 01, which hasn't been. So it's not. I think
Brian, can you hear me?
I think I said I could submit it as soon as possible, but really thinking about all the work to do, it'll probably be something like Sunday or Monday. I think it'll be okay to submit it then. And I'll also be talking about the path going forward.
Does anybody has a private channel to David?
I don't know
to tell
how
him
we're going to manage.
I'm trying to talk to them. Can you hear me?
I guess there's some sort of cues. Somehow people can somehow raise their hand.
But he cannot hear me.
I'm not going to look at that. So I'm going to depend on Brian to do something in the event that someone has a question. And
David, can you hear? Can you hear us?
Interrupt me. He may call me on the phone or something. I don't know. Anyway, supposedly there's supposed to be these Jabber scribes, which is just nothing really. And someone needs to take notes. But I think since this is recorded, I'll just produce notes from the recording. All right. So now the goals of doing the RFC 5661 is partly it's just time. It's been so long since we did this, and we've been putting off and putting off and putting off. So we have to do a general cleanup. Hello?
We can't see your screen, and you can't hear us.
I know I can't hear you. I can't, but that is just a general media echo problem, that only one person can speak at a time. It's a drag to now.
So that's actually not true. Many people can speak.
All right, maybe
I don't think so. Yeah.
What do we want to do about it?
So.
Okay, how do I do that? All right. So okay, how do I stop? Okay.
David, can you hear?
I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Okay.
Mr. Sarkar, I can hear you.
Okay, so David can hear us, and I don't think like his claim is true. That is the main takeaway issue. So, so this has not been very productive to me at all, and I don't know like if there are any other chairs can take control of the slide sharing.
Now you see my slides?
Can anybody else can share?
Oh, his slides are up now. I can share his slides.
It's coming. Yeah, it came.
Yeah.
Well, how do I do that?
But
with this presentation view?
No.
Turn on. see NFSV4. What? Okay, sure. Right under it, what? Above what?
Are you talking to us?
It's talking to
Yes, I see
Chuck.
chat. Yes.
Can anybody else share the slide? Chairs.
Doing it.
Can you please do that?
Okay.
Trying
Okay. Yes.
this.
Okay. Share preloaded slides. It says all the slides are. The new bed deck is being shared. Okay. Fine.
Okay, let me try.
Okay. It says it. Okay. I press that. It says a new deck is being shared, and then.
Let me try.
And then what? Okay. Expand slide. Okay. Here. Okay. Yes. All right.
Yeah, but that's.
All right. I see that. Okay. So
Hey,
how do I
that's
go on to
me.
the next slide? All right. Where was I talking about? All right. All right. So I see slide. I'm on slide 2. How do I advance slides?
Dave,
Just say
I
the
have
word.
control.
Say the
Well, maybe I
word.
just talk.
So Dave, you can
Okay. Fine. All
BP
right.
to
So
go to.
as I said, we have a need for general cleanup. There's a ton of errata reports. Like, I don't know. It's probably some number of dozens, and we also have to address those. I've addressed a lot of those so far, and we also have to address some of those that were rejected. Trying to already get upset about this point, but basically, the issue is that if the working group consensus has changed when we're doing this new document, we can change mistakes that we've made as long as we address compatibility issues, and that's a lot of what we'll be doing. There's also the opportunity to address similar mistakes for which there are no reports. And at some point, I think several months on in this process, that the window on that will close, and we'll just have to clarify what we have written without changing it. All right. Another part of the cleanup is reconsideration of choices regarding the RFC 2119 keywords. There are a bunch of musts that are not followed, and if something is a must and you're not following it, then something's broken. A lot of non-actionable shoulds and musts, like things like say, well, you should do this if you want to do that, or, well, that's not really what a should is for. And so there is some uncapitalized shoulds and musts that need to be capitalized, although I don't know, I haven't seen that many of those. All right, let's go on to the next slide.
Hold on.
If I can. Okay, all right.
There we go.
Okay. So one of the big organizational change that is now going on and is to adapt to NFSV4 wide documents. Before there were now we have a minor document for minor versioning, a V4 wide document for minor versioning, internationalization, we actually have a working group document, and security, which now is a big deal. It's time for a big change in this area because the current handling is very bad, and also because we now have to update the document to reflect the work that has been done. That Chuck will be talking about later about RPC with TLS. I have a very early ID to start with. But also, another organizational change is we have to get away from 600, or actually 700-page documents by splitting them up. So there will be a new document suite, which will have an introductory document, a separate discussion and reference documents, an XDR document, and a PNFS document, multi-server namespace document. One of the documents, the reference document, will be a little under 300 pages, but that will be the biggest one. All right.
So
David, let's go on to the
did you start
to the next slide.
Did you start to work on that, or you just wishful thinking?
It's a way to do that. Wait for me to do that. How we go from 40? All right. Yeah. Okay. Now let's talk about the Nationalization Document, and the reason for doing this is that the internationalization that's in RFC 5661 and now RFC 8881 was never implemented. Most people who read the document sort of ignored it and never implemented because it was pointless. It's just a mess. The 4.1 implementations followed pretty much RFC 7530, even though these were different minor versions. The original goal was to update RFC 7530 and apply to all of NFSV4. Unfortunately, we had some problems with that. One is there were some conflicts about internationalized names, so that if I just took the RFC 7530 and tried to submit it, it said, "Oh no, you can't do that. You're making normative reference to an obsolete document." And I think you could turn it off and say, "Okay, I only want to see." I only want to. It would be you could submit that document, but I didn't think I could go to the ISG with that. So I have that problem, and that's still a problem. And one of the steps we're going to take is figuring out or I'm going to have to do is figure out how to deal with that. Another problem is that Nico Williams pointed out that RFC 7530 did not deal with the case-insensitive case very well, and that kind of equivalence is dependent on the unicated version. So that was a problem. It isn't a problem for most real implementations, but it is a specification problem. So let's go on to the next slide. All right, so let's talk about the current status of the international document. There is a working group document, thanks to people who have commented, but there's very little discussion of this due to the lack of working group interest or expertise in this area, but still, we do have to do it. The reason is all the existing implementations were basically based on what was in RFC 3010. And they're satisfactory to the implementers and users. So there's little implementer motivation to change the situation. Still, we have to get to a working group last call somehow, and I don't think we can do that without addressing some of these issues. We need a document that's consistent with existing implementations and addresses the issues with trying to update RFC 7530. All right, next slide. Oh, in answer to Richard's, I think actually Chuck is hosting. I'm actually hosting the slides, but I don't know how to move slide to slide, and so I think Chuck is dealing with that. All right, now this is a discussion of getting the path forward. We'll need to rely on expertise outside the working group. Now, I hope someone knows of someone who's suitable. Someone who's suitable has to know about internationalization. It has to realize that the file system's needs for internationalization are different from those of applications. That was the problem that we had with the original internationalization in RFC 3530. And is prepared to be helpful in meeting our needs. And Nico turned out to meet the first of those two, but not the third one, and so that turned out to be a disaster. So originally, David Black directed me to Pete Resnick and Peter San Andre. And I sent them mail saying, gee, can you help me? And they, I don't know why, they lost interest or something, but they just said, oh, we'll give you a review by the internationalization director. And what happened is Nico did that. And Nico understood the problem, but he wasn't very helpful. He had what he thought was a great idea. Well, it wasn't a great idea. And he thought it would address every problem ever, and it didn't. He just wrote this enormous document, which was not a help to us. But he did have a few good ideas, unfortunately, that I had to incorporate. Anyway, let's go on to the next slide. All right, now this is the meat of the work that I've been done in the last few months. Is getting to have a security document. Right now, it's just an ID. It's actually a very early ID. Because the deadline was so soon, I didn't really do a complete document, but I did do enough to serve as a basis for discussion, I think, I hope. There are lots of issues that require working group input to resolve. There's lots of sections that I said to be done or will be elaborated in a later draft. But anyway, the details of that issue will be of those issues will be addressed in a later talk. In fact, the next talk. I'm looking for a more complete document in around a month. I don't think that will take multiple months. It will not be. We're not talking about IETF 112. Still, I think I've provided enough in the document that we can have some working group input about things they either agree with or don't agree with, people agree with or don't agree with. I think that discussion will primarily happen on the mailing list, but there may be some design discussions needing, and we can arrange those if that seems like it's needed. Okay, and now BIS base 01 expired, and I replaced it with 02 without any change up except the date and changing 01 to 02. Really nothing changed. That will be allowed to expire next time because having that document for comparing is not so useful once the BIS document is split up into about 6 or 7 documents. So as I said, that will exist for another 6 months and probably just die. On to the next slide. Okay, zeros are expired. I had hoped to get done by the deadline, which was about 3 weeks ago. I wasn't able to, but I'll submit a version next week. I'll adapt that document to the security document and not doing much else. One of the things I did is do a little more work on the split up of the documents and how that will eventually happen. Okay, I guess that, okay. So let me talk about the future steps on this document. We need to complete the errata. There's not so many left. I did a lot of the erratas, but the ones that are left are the hardest ones, including the ones involved in PNFS, the one that was rejected. Maybe there's more than one that was rejected. I'll be then focused the work on the document split up. And when you split up documents, intermediate document references are a big issue. I'm looking at automated the process. So because of the need to do that, that will take multiple months, and I think I'm looking for submission of that document, the first split up version of that by IETF 112. Maybe the PNFS document is a lagger unless I can get Tom Haynes to help with that, because he has RC, I think it's 5434, that modifies that, and we have to figure out how to merge those together into a good PNFS document. Okay. All right, now this is the final slide. I hope the final slide. I think this is the final slide. You know, steps going forward. I'm not ready to come up with milestones here, but it's a ways away. So the initial focus has been and will be getting the NFSV4 wide documents to working group last call, and a solid working group last call. The next focus is splitting up the document, the rest of the document, into the appropriate document, into an introduction, a base discussion document, multi-server namespace, PNFS file, and the reference document. There's about six documents that need editors. Now, I'm looking for volunteers. If there are volunteers, let me know. Let me know, because it would be helpful. Doing most of the roles of most of these are not all that difficult, but there are some exceptions. Again, I'm asking you, if you can help, it would be a help. Once that's done, a big part of the effort will be document review. I'm asking for everyone's help in that. Read these documents as develop it, and get rid of things that don't make sense. And we're going back and look at. I thought we did a good job of reviewing RFC 5661, but but now looking at the document now, after the time that's gone on, I said, well, maybe we didn't do such a job. Maybe we have to do more effort in reviewing it this time. All right, I think that's this slide deck, and I've taken more time than I expected. But anyway,
Soren, what's your question?
what?
So it's not a question, it's a point. Maybe you say splitting, but somebody should take the action, write a draft, an RFC, detailing which parts will be which sections.
All right,
I think it will be a good start.
Go on to the
Otherwise,
next slide deck, the one on security.
No, I'm talking about the splitting the
Can't
big
hear
one.
you.
Cannot
Can't hear
me?
you.
Huh.
He can't hear anybody. No, I can hear you. Obviously, I'm talking to you, Soren.
Yeah, I know. So they cannot hear me. So maybe, anyways, my point is that it will be good to have a draft describing the split. So I want to contribute, but I don't know how
Soren
to
wants
split
a
it.
draft describing the split.
Yeah,
I got it.
somehow, right? Because it's
Sorry,
nice to
I
say.
can hear.
Got it. I got it. I
Okay.
got it, Soren.
Yes, I
Send the
can.
notes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Describing the split.
He wants a what?
A draft that describes the split.
Well, there will be some discussion in 01, which I'm submitting in about within a week.
Okay. I thought it would be nice to have a draft so everybody can decide which piece I can, for example, contribute.
I think
Yep. Got it, Soren.
that Brian's captured this.
I have it in notes.
Good.
Go ahead.
Okay, sure. All right, yes. All right. Well, as I said, I've done most of the work in the security area, and it's not a complete document, but I think it's a good basis for discussion. And whether you agree with some of the things I've said or disagree with them, we need to discuss these issues. All right, let's go on to the next slide. All right, what are the motivations in doing this? Well, big thing was the state of the existing security considerations. There's no threat analysis at all. No discussion of the weakness of auth-sys. No discussion of the need for encryption. And, we just have, this is the opportunity The fact is, if we didn't have RPC with TLS to go with this, we'd be up shit creek, because there's no way to now that we have this, there is an opportunity to correct these issues, and this was the first stab at doing that. We need it, and we also need to consolidate the discussion of both minor versions in a single NFSV4 wide document. I think I've been seeing all the slight cases where there's slight differences between v4.1 and v4.0, and I had to deal with that. We made that more complicated, but you'll see if you read the document some of the issues that I've dealt with. But I think we have an opportunity to say security should be dealt with in a single document, even though there are some differences. For example, SACLs and DACLs, and a few things that I'm unsure about. Like, for example, why it says that you have clients should implement privacy, and I think v4.0 and v4.1 say different things on this point. So I think the working group will do some work in seeing to what degree we can unify v4.0 and v4.1. But where we can't, we'll have to both point to different treatment. One of the issues was the fact that when discussed SecInfo, it needs to be extended to deal with the multiple transports. I think I've done that, but that's tricky because SecInfo are in both v4.0 and v4.1, but SecInfo no name is only in v4.1, and that was one of the difficulties. But anyway, I'm not talking about the difficulties here. This slide is about motivation. All right, let's go on to the next slide. Okay, as I described this, as looked, there are a whole bunch of attributes that are critical to security, like ACL and SACL and DACL and mode. But interesting enough, nobody's has mentioned in that connection owner and owner group. Now, those are really, as far as I can see, those are really required actions. I can't imagine a client or server implementation, a server implementation that doesn't support both of those attributes, or a client that tolerates it. So I think basically those are essentially required attributes, even though it used to say capital recommended, and we said small recommended, but one of the issues is really those are required. Also, one of the new features in v4.0, this is a real difference, v4.0 and v4.1, is the sections on coordination of ACL and mode. But they need a lot of work on my part, I think, and we do review the changes. There are no clear reasons for many uses of should and must. It seems that's random. I addressed this in the document, and a lot of places where I say, well, this needs to be resolved or be discussed with the working group. Now, the whole motivation for doing that is saying, well, yes, these should not conflict, but there are multiple definitions of conflict because there are multiple different definitions of the mapping between mode, between ACL and mode. And I think that's one of the issues that I think has to be addressed. Also, there's a place where it said, well, this is a should and it's intentional, but what does that mean? It seems to basically be a may, because somehow they don't want to, quote, invalidate certain old implementations. So that'll be discussed in later slabs and details. So I think it's now time to drop this, because that old ACL model was never accepted by POSIX. and V4 decided on a different one, and
Yes.
given that V4 has decided on a different one, maybe we should just implement that one or make that one the one that we describe rather than say, well, it could be either this or that. It's a recipe for non-interoperability. All right, next slide. All right, as I said, this is a very preliminary document. I rushed to get in by the deadline. It turns out that NetApp had a week off around July 4th, and that was my opportunity to do what I could do to get this in. And I did enough not to have a polished -00, but something that I think was useful to be a basis for discussion. And this document has replaced the security needs document, which I said in the slide says will be allowed to expire, but actually it expired yesterday. The goal of the security needs document, the motive in which the security needs document was, it says, well, we have to decide on this, this, and this, but it isn't very easy to get people to discuss things in a vacuum. So what I did is I took a position, and maybe people agree with it, maybe people disagree with it, but it's a basis for discussion. If people don't like it or want something different, we can discuss that. And I said needed one more month, so I think I do need. There's lots of typos. Comment on the mailing list. We just don't have time to discuss it here. But I think it'll be on the mailing list. There's lots of TBD sections, and we'll address those within the next month. All right, now the next slide. Well, I don't know who's read this, but in any case, I haven't heard a lot of comments so far, but eventually, there are 23 paragraphs where I said working group discussion needs or words close to that. Many of those are easy to address. Some of those might be hard to resolve. I've done a major restructuring, so people will have to read these and say whether they agree or disagree. But because of the need to restructure things, we cannot review a diff. A diff just says everything is different. So I'm asking people to read the document and comment about issues you see. And I'm going to assume that if there's no comment, people are okay with that, and we'll go on. All right. As I said, about a month, maybe that'll turn into 6 weeks, but I really will focus on getting that done in real. I will address the minimal. I will definitely address the typos. I'll fill in the TB sections. Anything that I get, where's the document, we'll try to resolve those, and we'll come as close as we can to full agreement. But that document will not be anywhere near a working group document. But I hope we'll resolve this. I know there's some people who say, well, gee, I have a performance issue, and I propose some compromise for that. But I think basically we cannot have, we have to have secure data. We have to have things, encryption as typically provided by RPC with TLS, but I don't think you can accept as a normal practice to send data without in the clear. All right, let's go on. So now I'm going to focus on the potentially, they may not be conditioned, but they're potentially contentious. State of the owner and group. I think they really are required attributes, but as I said, it might have difficulty just say that, given that we have such a weird history with the fact that these were explicitly recommended, capital recommended, now really optional, but they're not optional. So I think I don't see people have big ideological objections, but it's going to be difficult to just say, oh, by the way, what we've been telling you about. I think that's just it might be too big a change. All right, now the other issue that's might be contentious is these in connection with the matching ACL and mode, and there are multiple ways of computing the mode from the ACL. And the RC 881 right now says this is a should, and this should is intentional. And what does it mean that this should is intentional? Normally, should means, okay, there's a valid reason, but it doesn't tell you not to do this. But what doesn't say what the valid reason is. It essentially says the valid reason is someone might not want to do this. I think this should be a must, although I can see people say, oh no, that's too difficult to change. But anyway, that's the potential condition. A compromise could be a real should with valid reasons to do other things. But what are valid reasons? I think in many cases we have shoulds in the document says where if you look for the valid reasons and the valid reason is someone might not want to, but that's not a valid reason. All right, that's the end of the slide. All right, now here's, I think these definitely will be, make some new recommendations about what you do about what you do about pure authentication. That basically is the client identifies them. I think I said right now it says, yes, you do this if you're going to use auth-sys. You have to do this. And it does make it a should because there is going to be a time when this is not going to be available. And that is explicitly the only valid reason in the current document. Now, as I said, I expect some people, I've gotten the feeling that some people say, oh, well, maybe, but what if I don't want to because I think I'm worried about the forms. I can't stop people from sending unencrypted data, but the document has to say this is a bad thing to do. Another issue, I don't see this as contentious, but I think there's a discussion of future security needs. We need agreement on what, we do not need agreement on what we'll do on these future needs, but we have to agree with the document say, well, these are things that we have a set of things that we do have, and we have things that probably will address, but we don't have to say how exactly we will address those. Anyway, I think, all right. Let's go on to the next slide. Okay, I think Chuck actually suggested having this discussion, and so some of those are I think derived from things that he has suggested, but there's also one that I had. So one of the things we've discussed in the past is security for data at rest. I think Chuck's model was based on something. There's a SAN feature whose name which was discussed at one time, but we never followed up on that. Maybe we should follow up. That's mentioned in the current document. Content signing. This is one of the subjects that Chuck is going to talk about. And when I looked at what was and wasn't in labeled NFS, you'll read it, but the recommendation is we might want to do something in this area that has different security that isn't basically auth-sys like. And the other thing we need is if encryption is important, we need an encrypted version of the RDMA protocols. That's a future item, but is in this document as something we should do. I'd like to ask people to let me know if there's anything on this list that shouldn't be on, or is there anything that I think needs to be added? All right, I think that's the end of. I think there's probably one more. Oh yeah, okay. All right. Well, there is going to be the intention is that we get to working group last call at sometime. It's not going to be soon, but yes, I have work on the 01, and there will be multiple revisions as we get to working group. And this is not a milestone, but I think the end of the year is reasonable target date for working group last call, and that's my intention. All right, that concludes my talk, and I think Chuck has some slide. I think his first. He might have time. I think he'll probably have time for his first set of slides.
Can you
All
hear
right,
me?
go ahead, Chuck. I'm muting myself. Now you can talk.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
No one. Yes?
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Oh,
All right.
can you see? We can see you even.
Yes. I could share this and if you want, Brian.
We can't hear you, Brian.
Yeah, go for it. I think I have to.
Wow, there are a lot of
You just got to
Is
keep
this-
clicking. Perfect.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to talk about IETF NFSV4 RPC TLS. I'll talk a little bit about the document status first, and then I'm going to talk about some implementation challenges. The current document is in the RFC editor queue now, so it's essentially a stable. It's got stable content. There are 3 documents that it's waiting on. 2 of them, DTLS connection ID and DTLS 13, are already in the RFC editor queue, and I think they're ahead of this one. So they're going to be coming out of that process very soon. The one that I'm a little more concerned about is the kitten TLS channel bindings for TLS 13. That is still waiting for area director write-up. So it has not started the more extensive ISG review process. So that one's going to be a little while. And RPC TLS will be in the editor queue waiting this, waiting the publication of this document. This one, the channel bindings document has to go first. So this is going to be a while. But as I said, the technical content of RPC TLS is stable. We don't have we can safely recommend that people start implementing to it. It's not a problem there. There are a couple of minor matters that need to be handled during final author approval. Russ Housley pointed out that the AS1 module in the document doesn't compile. He suggested a replacement that does compile. He confirmed that it compiles. I can integrate that into the document that's on GitHub for people to review the change before I ask the RFC editor to integrate that change. Also, I'm finding that people are confused by the term RPC over TLS. They believe that this is a new transport for RPC, and that's not at all what this is. This is a new security mode for RPC. So I would like to replace the term RPC over TLS with RPC with TLS throughout the document.
Makes sense.
I can, since we're not all on audio, I can actually put this on the mailing list and do a poll there. We do have polling available in MeetEcho, but let's not spend time playing with that. So as I said, I can mock these changes up and put them into the GitHub editor's copy of this and send that to the mailing list and see if everybody salutes. And I will do that in a week or two. There is an implementation status section of this document. I'm not sure it lists all of these, but these are the implementations of what's in the document as we know it now. FreeBSD client and server are out front, and Tigrin's Java-based client and server are right behind that. I believe Hammerspace has an implementation in their server. I'm not quite sure. I haven't confirmed that yet. I'm working on a prototype in Linux that is currently just the client that I'm testing against Rick's server. Eventually, that will be a server too. I'm intending to work on that. And I'm aware of a lot of interest from the cloud data center NFS servers. That would be Amazon. I'm reading
Sure.
Lars's comment in the chat channel. Okay. People can go over there and read that. It's about the kitten TLS channel bindings document that I referred to earlier. So the folks who are running things like Amazon EFS and other cloud data center NFS server implementations are interested in this and following it closely. So that's good news. We had our first community testing event during the pandemic in February. It was actually very successful. We basically did the whole thing in the cloud. We used Discord as the collaboration tool and a virtual private network for our test systems. That's sort of the non-TLS news there. The TLS related news is Rick and Tigran both brought their TLS implementations. I don't believe they tested with them, but they were there. And using the VPN that we set up for this event, it's basically continuously running, and we've been able to do some TLS related testing in the interim between now and the next event that's coming up in October. We don't have any CTHON 04 like tests for TLS yet. That's something that people have started asking questions about. I'm not
Chuck?
sure we're going to change CTHON. Yes.
What does that mean to me? Sorry, I don't understand it.
The second bullet there, CTHON 04 like test.
Yeah.
What I mean is we don't have something that will exercise the RPC with TLS technology and, provide a smoke test that everybody can run. It basically was part of all the tests that we bring to the testing events. Does that make sense?
Okay.
I'm not sure it would. CTHON 04 is pretty ossified. I'm not sure it's appropriate to add any TLS related tests to it. But I think we do need to think about ways of confirming that someone has a working TLS implementation. It does the basics, like the RPC
CTHON
TLS
is just
probe.
more of a CTHON is more of a excuse me, it's more of a NFS protocol thing. What would need to happen to test the TLS part of it?
We can discuss the details offline.
Fair enough.
I'm just calling this out at a high level here.
Fair enough. Okay.
But we need some discussion. So yeah, we'll take it offline.
Fine.
I've also been having some conversations with the Red Hat folks about how they prefer to do quality assurance. There are some interesting questions there. I don't have to get into details here, but contact me offline if you'd like more information on this. So next 3 slides or so are talking about some of the implementation challenges I faced with an in-kernel RPC with TLS implementation. First of all, usually an in-kernel RPC security mode needs some user space support. Currently, GSS is supported on Linux using an upcall. It's the same way on Solaris. I believe it's also that way on FreeBSD. So the kernel basically recognizes the need to generate a GSS context, and it calls up to a user space helper to construct that context, and that information is passed back down to the kernel, which then uses it. TLS is not that much different. We originally thought we would need an upcall mechanism to do this, but upcall mechanisms are a little rickety. They require something to be running on the other end of the upcall. And if it's not, the kernel it doesn't have a good way of recognizing that and timing out quickly. Then there are other problems, like support for containers. It's been difficult. So we found an in-kernel Handshake implementation for Linux, and so I'm considering that. I'm building a prototype around that because it's interesting technology, and I think it'd be interesting to compare that with the traditional upcall mechanism that we use for GSS. There is some concern around that, mostly with technical debt kind of issues that would duplicate the TLS Handshake implementation. User space already has multiple ones, so we would be adding yet another one in the kernel. This code is definitely rocket science. It's requires cryptographic expertise to build it correctly, to engineer it correctly. But it would provide proper support for Linux containers, and we believe it could be more scalable. That might be an issue on the server side because servers have to deal with a constant barrage of connection requests. Clients, not so much. There's also been a concern about how much Quick might use or reuse, actually, the TLS Handshake logic. We certainly want to be aware of when we get Quick support eventually, how much of this we can use without having to duplicate the code yet another time. One of the criteria for getting something merged into the Linux kernel is to understand where the resources and sponsorship for long-term maintainability will come from. It's not just somebody wrote this, we want to throw it over the wall and let the kernel community maintain it. That's sort of a 100,000-foot view of the process, but when you zoom in a little bit, you discover that we really have to have answers to difficult questions like who's paying for the upkeep. And I list some bullets here that describe some of the things that will need to be maintained over the long term if we have a TLS implementation in the kernel. So for example, implementing support for a TLS v1.4 or 5, should they arrive, somebody's got to be responsible for handling that in the Handshake code. Somebody has to be responsible for adding new crypto algorithms like post-quantum or whatever new fangled thing is coming down the road. Also has to be responsible for removing those crypto algorithms that are deprecated over time. We need to have someone who can hello?
Chuck, I don't mean to be slow, but so these are the available algorithms bubble up to visibility in the protocol, or those are a configuration detail in the implementation?
I'm not sure I'm clear on the distinction.
So, well, let's try CVEs. So CVE is primarily going to be involved with the vulnerability in the Linux kernel TLS code, not with any protocol.
Yeah, but I'm just saying that if we have a TLS handshake implementation in the kernel, if we decide to go that route, we need to have somebody who's responsible for dealing with a CVE should it arise. Yes, I
For
guess that's not a protocol issue, so maybe the working group doesn't care about that specifically. But
no,
I think
I'm just want clarity here. I don't mind you talking about it. I just want to make sure that that it's just, we're talking implementation. That's all. Sorry.
well, the word implementation is right there on the slide.
Yeah. But I got nervous on the
Well,
second bullet. That I was, does that bubble up? Never mind. We can take it offline. I want to do
okay.
what is the negotiation of crypto algorithms for TLS from client to server? Okay.
Yeah, it's sort of below RPC, so it's not our concern in that regard. But the TLS handshake, I believe, has to be aware of what crypto algorithms are available in the kernel, what's supported, what it's allowed to use, that kind of thing. So,
I guess my only comment would be is it really a file system thing or a networking thing?
it's a somebody needs to pay for it thing.
Okay, fair enough. Okay, I'm just saying, just it's TLS. We're networking people, not network. I mean, we're file system people, not networking
Yeah,
people.
but the issue is we want this infrastructure merged into the kernel, so we need to identify who's going to continue to maintain it for the purpose of everybody who wants to use it. That includes NVMe, that includes NFS, SMB. All the folks are going to rely on this networking infrastructure component, and so I think
Yes.
we need to
NVMe
understand who's going to pay
definitely.
for it.
NVMe definitely, because I'm working on draft still, so I know that.
Okay, I think I've spent enough time on this slide, so I'm going to move on. There we go. There have also been some performance concerns. So I think I should say that I'm going through these slides because I think the working group would be interested to know the sort of ramifications and the shockwaves that are happening amongst the implementing community about this protocol that we've created. So that's kind of why I'm talking in some detail about this stuff. As I mentioned earlier, we think there might be a handshake scalability issue on the server side. That is, like, for example, after an unplanned server reboot, a bunch of clients will want to reconnect with the server roughly at the same time. We know that Handshake crypto is CPU intensive. It takes a lot of it generates a lot of workload on the CPU, and so it could serialize the connections and the handshakes. That's kind of important to however we want to architect this, whether we use a GSS subcall or whether we do it in kernel. Now, it's true that the CPU will be just as expensive to use if it's in user space as it is in the kernel, but there are other issues around this, like context switching and things like that. So we want to make sure.
Yeah.
There's a question in the chat room. Can TLS features for session reestablishment help after a reboot? I'm not sure. I was under the impression that those features are involve volatile memory, and so after server reboot, basically the clients would need to reestablish state. So, but I'm not an expert there. Somebody else like Lars would have to respond to that question. We also, getting back to the slide, the TLS Record Protocol is kind of key for RPC with TLS because for storage protocols, we're moving a lot of data. We're encrypting and decrypting a lot of data. We think encryption offload features, especially the NICs that can do this, will be important to the success of RPC with TLS. But unfortunately, I found that support in hardware devices lags behind what's in the kernel, what's in the software. I guess hardware devices are still at 1.2. They probably won't get some of the spiffy, shiny new crypto algorithms until later. So we just have to sort of keep that in mind as we're sort of road mapping the availability of products with this feature in it. So I think this is my last interesting slide. Good, and we're right on the hour. So I think there are some things that the working group needs to pay attention to. One is we're going to need some document that discusses how NFS, probably both V3 and V4, deal with the new security features available with TLS. And I list some of them here. Obviously, Exchange ID and Friends will need to spell out the new protocol, the new authentication type, RPC out TLS. And second, Fo and Mount will need to do that. I'm not saying this well, but I'm kind of rushing. And I think we want to have some security policy guidance. There was a discussion on the mailing list recently about exactly how the mount option should work. We probably should have the same discussion about how share security settings work on servers. And the last bullet here, user authentication. I've already had somebody requesting the ability to do user authentication with X509 certificates. It's not going to be easy to do with TLS necessarily, just because those are certificates that identify peers and not users. But there are other concerns as well. For example, if a client has a single user, then obviously the certificate can potentially identify a user, and we have issues around, for example, if the certificate is lost or stolen. So we have to talk a little bit about protecting the certificate, either with a trusted computing module or a password to open the certificate and use it for mounting. Okay, that's my presentation.
Okay.
So we're at the top of the hour plus a
Yeah.
couple.
And you have some material for the left for tomorrow.
Yes.
Yes. All right. All right. I'll try to write up some notes and send them.
I think Brian was also taking minutes.
Yeah, I've been doing it with the online note taker, actually. I'll send the link out.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm done.
Okay, guys.
Tomorrow,
Have a
guys.
good one.
Everybody.
Tomorrow. See you tomorrow.